Welcome into Other People's Shoes. I'm your host, Neil, and today my guest is Christine. Christine is going to be taking us through the female perspective on this idea of pornography and the damages that it causes. Now, Christine does have a unique perspective, at least in my point of view, because, again, she's not only giving the women's perspective, but the wife's perspective on this topic. So I hope you're ready, because you know I am. So let's go.
Hey, come take a walk with me. Not like you used to do. Do something different and put yourself in other people's shoes. Open up your mind and open up your eyes and change your direction, change your perspective.
Welcome into Other People's Shoes. I'm your host, Neil, and today it's a day like any other, but it's a day that I hope all will have their eyes open and their ears open, because today we take part 2 in this series on pornography. Last week we had a male perspective. This week we get a female perspective. So I hope you will welcome in my guest today, Christine. Christine, how are you?
I'm fine.
Now, Christine's been a longtime friend of mine and my wife's. I will say you're probably more Team Elizabeth than Team Neil, but I am, in all disclosure, wearing an orange shirt, which pains me to wear to hopefully help Christine feel a little more at home. She is an Oregon State fan, so go Beavs. That was painful to say as well, considering my history with Oregon State and their beating of North Carolina into two baseball championships. Thank you, Nick Leonardo. There you go. Shout out to you as well, being a Beaver fan. So with that as the onset, Christine, let's get to some business that we have to take care of first, which is always fun. What size shoe do you wear?
8.5 to 9.
8.5 to 9. I think that's a popular girl size so far.
Pretty average. Yeah.
Is it pretty average?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And then do you have a favorite pair of shoes that you wear?
High heels. Love high heels.
Do you have a certain, I don't know, are there
Boots,
brands?
Black leather boots with high heels.
Okay.
Yeah. Matches almost everything I own.
So we are wearing black high heel leather boots.
What?
Well, because we're talking about being in your shoes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Right? So I'm in these shoes with you, is the idea behind
that would
that.
be a sight.
I don't even want to visualize that. No. Sorry, delete that from your memory, everyone listening. Now we lost everyone. So, but Christine, when I was thinking of this topic of pornography and trying to develop and kind of come to the realization of who could I get to talk about this, believe it or not, you're one of the first people that popped into my head.
Why
I don't know why. Actually, I do know why, and I'll tell you why. Because in my mind, you have a story behind it. Not only do you have a story behind it, I think you're willing to tell that story behind it. Sure. And I think your background is teaching. You're constantly presenting information. So I thought I needed someone who was willing, 1, to tell a story, and 2, who could articulate it well enough that I think others would follow along with and maybe even empathize with. So it's a little bit of a compliment to you, I hope. I hope you receive it as such, because it's meant to be.
That's great.
But anyway, so what is your story? How does your life intersect with this, in my mind, a very damaging topic? So we'll just dive into that. How does your life intersect with that?
Well, I would say probably 6 years after my husband and I had been married, it kind of came out that things had been happening, and we've now been married. Actually, next week we'll be married 21 years.
Wow! So
together 28.
So what year does this take place? Where do you discover it?
Year 6 of our marriage, so I would say 15 years ago.
Okay.
Is when we discovered it, but then it was going on virtually our entire marriage up to that point. From year 1 to 6.
And you never knew?
No.
Never shared with you?
No.
Never talked to you about it?
Mm-mm.
Why do you think that is from your perspective? Now, I know you can't necessarily speak for your husband, but why would you?
He was ashamed.
Okay.
He was ashamed of it, and he just, later on we had spoken, and he had said that he hoped that it would just get better and that it would just go away, and he was so ashamed he would pray all the time that it would just take care of itself, that God would take care of it, and all it did would get worse and worse and worse until it was just something that couldn't be hidden anymore. And I wound up discovering it when he was on a hunting trip. So.
Okay, so take us through that day. You discover it. How does that happen? Where you discover it?
Well, so he likes to hunt out in Eastern Oregon, so there's not very good cell reception, and I don't get to hear from him every night, but he's usually gone for about a week at a time. Anyhow, I was just on our computer and started seeing some weird stuff on the history, and I thought, well, what's going on here? And then I just kept delving deeper and deeper and came up with some really weird stuff and some things with names that had no business being on our computer. So pretty much the next time I heard from him, which was the next day or two, I told him that I had found some things on the computer, and he basically needs to be ready to come clean with everything by the time he got home from hunting. Otherwise, I would be gone. And so he had at least 8 hours, because it was an 8-hour long drive, to try to figure out what he was going to say and how he was going to say it and call people. And he, I do know that he called some people in his life then that were good Christian friends and asked for advice and what to say. And basically all of them said, you need to tell her the truth on everything. And we're talking every indiscretion since we had been married, actually even since before. And so it was a pretty heavy thing that, I just remember when he got home, he couldn't talk. He was so distraught. He didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if I was going to stay or leave. Because, I had grown up in a Christian household. My dad was a Lutheran minister my whole life. He had grown up probably most of his life as well in the Assembly of God, and so we both had Christian backgrounds. So he knew that what he was doing was not okay, but you get into his line of profession with, lots of guys around, and that's something that was just prevalent, and most guys don't see anything wrong with it. But he knew that there was something wrong with it, so that was always something. The more he tried to hide it, the worse it became. So anyways, we sat down on the couch that night when he had got home, and he went back as far as to, us being engaged, and described, how things happened and how things played out. And he said he fully expected me to leave. He didn't think that I would stick around for anything like that because of how bad it had become. I mean, we were talking hours a day. It was bad. It was really bad. And so I didn't know what to say. I was thankful that he had come clean. I was thankful that he was honest. And honestly, I think that's the only thing that saved him. Because had there been any other lies, I think I would not have been able to trust him again. But that was the very first step in rebuilding the trust relationship, which had been completely shattered at that time. And so I just remember us standing in the hallway and just pretty much sinking to the ground and our arms around each other, and I just cried and cried and cried and cried. And he did the same, and that was all. I mean, we couldn't say anything. It was so horrible to try to go through and relive all the awful things that he had done throughout our marriage. And yeah, it was really devastating, and it completely shattered my world because, here I was. I have never been with anyone other than my husband. We were high school sweethearts. And to have something like that come out was very much, it completely shattered my world. It broke the perfect bubble that I thought that we had as a marriage. I wondered what was wrong with me, why he needed something else. And I can tell you that he was by far much more than what he needed to be at that moment, because he made sure that I knew that I had nothing to do with it. He made sure that I knew that it was all him. He made sure that I knew that he would, from this point on, make sure that it would not happen again. And so not only did he come clean with the truth, but he told me that it wasn't my fault. And he signed up for men's groups. He signed up to teach a class, Every Man's Battle, not only at his work, but also at church. He signed up to teach a men's Bible study at work as well to try to help other men who were going through the same thing. He walked through this with our pastor, got a couple of accountability partners, and I can tell you it was a really long, hard road. I mean, it was years before I really felt like I could trust my husband again, but that wouldn't have taken place had he not stepped up and done the things that he needed to do. He took accountability. He did not try to blame or rationalize anything. It was pretty incredible, and so that was a really good foundation to start the recovery process, which was pretty horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I can't relate to you as a lady. Shocker, newsflash, right? So, but as a lady, how did that really make you feel? And I know feelings aren't facts and all that other nonsense that people maybe subscribe to, but as a woman, like, I want to try to walk in that pain with you. Like, how devastating really was that for you?
Well, you feel like you're not enough. You feel like you're not pretty enough, like you're not giving your husband enough sex, like you're not, you just feel like you're not enough. And I mean, you see pictures of, women in magazines and movies, and it doesn't matter how thin people are or how voluptuous they are, they still feel like they're not good enough because everyone in the movies and the TV, so much better. And especially in pornography, I mean, the women are just ridiculous. They're not even real. And so that's something that normal women just can't live up to. But nonetheless, you still feel like you should, because that's what, at that time, my husband was looking at. So I felt completely inadequate in every way.
So you're almost believing the lie along with him, right? Because the idea of pornography is it really does lie to you. It gives you this false sense of security, it gives you this false sense of whatever. But women, would you say, and I know you're probably answering for your whole gender, but you specifically, it sounds like what you're saying is, hey, I'm believing the lie along with him because I'm measuring myself up to these ladies just as much.
Right.
Agree?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, also, especially since I had never been with anyone except my husband, and to know that he had been watching these things and doing things as a result of watching things, it was almost a bit of a jealousy thing, but it was the fact that he had given women, whether they were real or in his life, or whether they were on film or in a book or a magazine, any kind of intimate attention, the kind of intimate attention he had given me, it was, I know this sounds strange, but it was like he had been cheating on me. And it didn't matter that it wasn't a real person that I knew. It felt like he had cheated on me with hundreds of women over the years. And that was a really dirty, awful feeling.
So you mentioned the road to recovery. What did that look like for you guys?
Well, we started trying to go to a Christian counselor. That was awful. I still remember that. Oh my gosh.
What was so awful about it?
Well, because
because again, people think Christian counselor, right? That's part of your
Right.
faith. That's, I mean, why they should be there to help you. Why was it so awful?
Because she had us try to relive everything again. Like, she needed the information. Wow. And so it was everything that had happened that first night when he got back from hunting, that entire first session. And to the point where we lived, probably half an hour away from the counseling. He wanted to walk home. He felt so unworthy and so horrible and ashamed that he couldn't even look at me. He just felt like he was absolutely nothing. I mean, and we tried that a couple different times, and it was horrible every time. We seemed to get better results talking with other people who had gone through it, or our pastor, than we did having to relive every detail and answer every question from a counselor. So that part was difficult. But then after that, like I said, we just tried. He had accountability partners. One of them was our pastor. One of them was a friend that he had worked with. And they were really good and very diligent about making sure that, he was on the up and up. And there's a great program that he got right off the bat called Covenant Eyes. And basically it tracks websites on your phone. And then that ended up with, we graduated to another one called XXX Church. And that also records every website, and you can put it on every device that you have. So between the two, we had that. And for a while, I was one of his accountability partners, and we learned really quick that that was not a good idea, because I would spend time going through and searching, and every time I did, I would have that anxiety in my chest. What am I going to see? What am I going to see? And there were a couple times, I thought I saw things, or I did see things, or there were innocent things that led to something else, and it was just ugly. And so we didn't start seeing real recovery until I got myself out of that, and I trusted the fact that he was relying on other men to keep him accountable, and I had to let God have the control, and I had to not have the control myself, because the more I tried to have the control, the more awful and miserable I felt. And that's pretty much that. But then as far as the rest of the recovery, my mental state was not good, because, like I said, my entire world had fallen down around me, and I felt like my husband had been cheating on me this whole time. And so I had to come to grips with a new reality that I had, which I thought I would never, ever have to do.
What would you say to women out there who, one, maybe have caught their husband doing this, and then two, maybe are in the stage of recovery?
Well, if they've caught their husbands doing something like this, my guess is that it's a whole lot worse than what they think. It's probably not just one little thing. They've probably been looking at it more than just one time. And so that's something that, I would just be point blank with and just be honest and say, hey, I need you to be honest with me. How bad is this? Do you need some help? Do you need to have an accountability partner to help keep you on track? And what was your other question?
And then what would you say to somebody as far as the road to recovery for them?
Oh, boy, I would say...
because like you were alluding to at kind of the onset of your story, is you had that moment where you're like, TTFN, I'm out, right? I'm done. I'm ready to go. I mean, I don't know if bags were packed. You're ready to go.
Yeah. No,
the taxi cab's waiting outside the doors. The song goes, leaving on a jet plane, but you were ready to go. So maybe there are others who are saying, I don't know what to do next. I found him. I've caught him. Now what?
Well, I can tell you that having someone to talk to is the biggest thing. And we had actually just moved here, and I don't make friends really quickly. I'm pretty shy until I get to know people. It's hard for me to talk to people until I really know them and feel comfortable. And sometimes that's a couple years. But I did have one person who I talked with a little bit. And I remember at one point saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to forget. I don't know how to move on. And her response to me was, well, you need to make a decision. Do you want this to, if you want this to go away, and she says, then divorce and be done. But she says, if you want to try to work on it and come out better the other side, she says, then you need to decide to forgive him. She says, you can't live in this world where you're so upset, but you're still here, and you're not forgiving him, but you're still here. She's like, forgive him and move on and learn and grow, or don't. Because where I was stuck. And so I was kind of horrified to hear those words at first, and I thought that was really harsh. But I needed to hear it because I needed to forgive him and I needed to move forward. And so really the only way I was able to do that was through him being honest with me on a regular basis, and him earning my trust back with all of the things that he was doing, which was really more than any woman could ask for. I mean, he truly took responsibility. Most people
Can you describe that if you're willing?
Yeah, well, like I said, he did the Bible studies. He read the books. He had the accountability on his phone and on his computers. He was on every time I asked him. He answered every question that I had, 100%, whether I wanted to hear the answer or not. I mean, he answered everything. He did everything possible to make sure that I could move forward. And I would say more than anything, it was just the mental block for me. And I had to come to the point where not only did he earn my trust back, which I can tell you now, we are more connected than we have ever been. We came out the other side stronger than we've ever been, and also with more trust than we've ever had. You would think that something like that would break the trust in a marriage, but not when you have God at the center. I mean, I would say most worldly relationships would be completely destroyed by what had happened. But we had Christ in the center. We had friends that were Christians that tried to help us through, that were praying for us. Both our parents were doing the same. So with all of that, we were able to recover and have, like I said, a marriage that's 21 years next week. And there's not a man in this world I would rather be with than him. And that's saying a lot, considering the pain and horribleness that was for years after. Yeah, right. It was years. Your recovery.
What would you say to the guy out there? Because as a guy, I've heard this said. Like, I don't think I've ever made this statement, so I'm being very careful, like researching my own mind right now. But I don't believe I've ever made this statement. But I've heard guys say, it doesn't hurt the woman.
Oh,
it's no big deal. My wife's fine with it. She doesn't care. In fact, she might watch it with me every now and then, or indulge in it with me. What would you say to that guy if he was sitting here right now with us?
Oh, I would say,
because I've heard that statement. Yeah. Maybe your husband has as well, but I know I've heard that statement.
Yeah. In fact, I remember when he told one of his non-believing friends, one of his fishing buddies, he was out with them, and they had said, what's been going on? And he's like, my wife and I are struggling. We're going through a recovery process. I'm addicted to pornography. And the guy was like, what? What do you mean you're addicted to pornography? Everybody looks at, like, he was floored. He thought he was just crazy.
Right.
What do you mean addicted to everybody looks at it?
It's no big deal.
Right. He has come...
It's like watching too much sports, or, being on the computer too much, or, maybe you have a shoe obsession.
Right.
Those people
like
need help too.
Like
yeah, exactly. But it's just no big thing, right? So going back to the question, like, what would you say to somebody, another guy sitting here makes a statement to you, Christine, it's no big deal. My wife doesn't care.
Yeah, I said, unfortunately, you're misled, because your wife is probably not being honest. Probably only because she wants your approval and wants you to desire her, and might be afraid to say, hey, might be afraid to look bad, might be afraid to look uncool, because I don't know, I think there was a time, and there still probably is, where couples want to use that type of thing to try to get more intimacy, but all it does is damage more. And it damages more because it is an unrealistic thing for a woman to be able to do things like that, or to be able to look like that. Or, there's so many things that it's just not reality. It's not reality at all. And to invite somebody else into your marriage bed is, to me, insanity. What's the purpose of being married if you're going to invite someone else or something else like that into your life? Because it just breeds insecurity, and there's no reason for it. There's just no reason to do it. And so if you think that, hey, my wife doesn't care, she hasn't said anything to me, well, but really, why do you need it? And maybe that's a better question to answer, is if you think you need it, maybe you need to get help in another area, because all that can do in the meantime and in the I don't have any studies right now to show, but there were so many things that we went through at that time, study after study, that just showed that all pornography did was harm marriages. That's all it did. And there's just better ways. There are better ways to have, better intimacy.
Well, there have been brain scans done on someone who, and I've seen them, who have done, heroin, a normal brain, someone who does heroin, a heroin brain, and then a pornography brain. I'm guessing they're dudes, not women. But now, statistically speaking, it's just as bad, because women are now becoming more as addicted, if not more addicted, than men.
Yes, I would say.
Which is crazy to me.
It's addictive to the brain. It is very much like sugar, very much like heroin, very much like anything like that. It is. It's an addictive thing that increases, your endorphins ridiculously high, and that's what it does. So, of course, it's going to be addictive, and of course, nobody's going to want to let it go. And it's really difficult to walk out of. So that's one clue, that if it takes, if you can't walk out of it and you really want to, which is what my husband wanted, he couldn't do it on his own, because it's that addictive. It's like trying to smoke on your own, or trying to quit smoking on your own. trying to quit drugs on your own, trying to quit meth or heroin or whatever. You need help and you need support because of the sheer addictive power of, the substance.
So you guys are pretty fortunate. You and your husband are very fortunate in my mind. Great parents, by the way, newly parents, because they've just been blessed with some amazing kiddos. But you have a boy and a girl, right? So what would you tell your son years later, now fast forwarding, 10 years, 12 years or so, and you find this? What would be your response as a mom? Are you ready for that?
Oh, what's funny is I remember ratting my brother out when we were in high school.
Wow, you were a narc? Are you kidding me?
I was his older sister, and I was protective. I was 5 years older than him, and I remember going to Mom saying, hey, look at what he's got.
I'm sure he loved you for that, by the way.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Well, funny enough, my stepdad at that time didn't think it was that big of a deal, and he just took the magazine and went, not a big deal. And my mom was thinking, are you kidding me? And so that was, I think, my first experience with it. But my own kid, I think the first thing I would say is, that's really disrespectful to women right off the bat. And, your father can talk to you about the rest. Because,
tag.
Well, honestly, I mean, he knows. He knows because he's walked through it.
Right.
And he knows what he needs to say. And I can tell you that there is no man in this world I trust more than him to have the right words to try to convey the seriousness of the addictive power of pornography.
So being a teacher, how many of your students do you think struggle with it?
Oh my gosh. I would say probably most that have cell phones. Because unfortunately, I have been privy to all sorts of things in the classroom where kids are supposed to be doing research or something like that, and I have walked up to several who have been in the process of watching videos in my classroom. And yeah, it's unfortunately that is something that it is such an easy thing for them to get a hold of, particularly when parents don't take cell phones at night. So we had a 14-year-old girl that we fostered probably 6 years ago, and every night my husband and I would take her cell phone. We'd plug it into the wall in our bedroom and we'd lock the door, and that's what we did. And we'd have to turn her phone off because she'd get texts and stuff all hours of the night. It was ridiculous. I can only imagine what it's like now. But most of my students, they're coming to school really tired. They're coming to school where they've just had no sleep and you ask them, I was up on my phone or whatever. I mean, they're honest. They were texting, they were watching videos, they were watching Netflix, they were watching YouTube, super inappropriate videos on YouTube. I mean, I hear the kids talk and overhear conversations, and they know stuff that I don't know. And I'm 43 years old. So
she's so old, folks. Just want to put that out there. It's a little side joke, but
no, it's really insane.
Were you the one telling me about the bracelet thing?
Yes.
Was that you? Could we walk through that? Is that okay? I know it's a little bit away from what we're talking about,
I teach 12-year-olds, right?
But I think it's relevant because I think it again just shows the gravity of our society and the gravity of where kids are gravitating to. If I'm going to play on that word a little bit, but tell me about the bracelet thing.
All right, so
from your description of it,
yeah,
because this is mind-boggling to me as a middle school parent now.
12-year-olds,
yeah. So 12-year-olds, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt this because it's so good or bad, really bad. It's really disgusting,
insane.
But go ahead.
But the boys were wearing all these different color bracelets, and some had a couple different colors, and some had some others, and whatever, and they basically, the colors represented different sexual acts that the kids would perform on them. And we heard tell of things like rainbow parties where girls would have, lipstick, different colored lipstick. And, the boys would be basically say, here you go. And so the girls would perform different sexual acts on the boys to make rainbows in certain places. They had names for the days of the week. Different sexual acts for the different days of the week, and they would perform that sexual act on that day of the week. It was really crazy, and it's still happening. Now, the biggest thing, the kids are coming around with girls' hair ties, and I've heard from other kids that what that means is that that's a girl that he slept with. And some boys have, 6 or 7 hair ties on one arm. The little scrunchies, they're now back. So it really is. At 12, I had no idea about these things, but these kids are so educated on not only sexual acts, but have actually done them, not just witnessed them, but have actually done them. And I don't know what else to attribute that to other than the availability of videos that show people doing these
Those
types of
sexual
things.
acts,
Because how
right.
how else would kids know?
So this makes me think of two things. One, my wife and I are much like you and your husband, high school sweethearts, right? And so my wife, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, she had a hair scrunchie, right? And it was purple. And so that was her favorite color, still is her favorite color. And I would take the hair scrunchie, and it had smelled like her perfume and her shampoo. And I put that around my left ankle in track and cross country. So, when I'm running and I'm feeling tired or fatigued or hitting the wall, I would look down and I would get a little inspiration like, hey, she's with me.
You should have put it around your wrist. You could smell it.
Well, I could have, yeah, but moving my arm up there could maybe smack myself in the face. But my point is that wasn't even on my radar.
Right.
And now as a middle schooler, my daughter comes home and says, she's going to beat me up if she hears this, which she won't because of the topic. But she says, Dad, this little guy wants she didn't call him little guy. I'm calling him little guy. He wants my hair scrunchie. And I'm like, now after hearing this, no, he doesn't get it. He does, because my daughter told him this story of my wife and I. And so I think that's why he wants it. But I'm really hoping that that's not the alternative. Anyway. So back to this. So how would you educate? I mean, have you had conversations with your middle school student parents on stuff that you've found or anything like that? And if you have, how does that conversation go down?
Only for, it's been really interesting to try to word certain referrals. I have a teacher I share a wall with, and frequently I'll go over and say, so how do I put this down in words? What do I say here? And, they'll help me out. And it's horrible. It's horrible to try. And I can't even imagine as a parent reading an email like this. But I do know that one teacher actually had, the group of boys come into his office and had them call their parents and say word for word what they were looking at and what they were doing, like actually tell them over the phone. I mean, that to me would be horrifying as a kid to have to tell your parent just exactly what you were doing that you weren't supposed to be doing when it comes to watching, certain types of pornography in school or whatever. But yeah, it's incredibly uncomfortable. And, the parents, they act shocked. I don't know if they actually are, but they act shocked and, oh, how could they, I'm so sorry that they did this and da, 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 da. But I can only imagine what's under the surface if this is what's coming, to a head, which is kind of how it was when I discovered all of that. I mean, I saw one thing, and then the deeper I dug, the more there was. I mean, it's just not one thing. It's just not anymore. If there's one, there's got to be 50, just because of the availability of it. It is everywhere.
So have you kind of, in a sense, made it your own personal crusade to make yourself available to other women who have walked through this or potentially would walk through this?
Oh, gosh. I would say maybe as we were going through it, yes. But if I hear of somebody having issues or that they're going through something like that, I will talk with them, and we'll talk about how there is hope on the other side and how they can get through it with Christ and with, other people loving them and walking through, especially accountabilities with their husband. I also talk about being proactive and getting certain things like XXX Church or Covenant Eyes. And so a lot of so my husband and I were really open with our care group, our Bible study group that we have. And, they know the history that we've gone through. And so a lot of the men that have been in our groups over the years, that's what they did. I wouldn't say that I go seek people out, but I'm definitely willing to talk to anybody who, and it's no secret. I mean, people that are our friends know what we've walked through.
I think that's important to recognize. And again, I think that's why I wanted to have that women perspective on, right? Last week we had Rob on, and Rob dove deeper than I expected, right? And so the whole time Rob and I are talking, if you haven't gone and listened to that, I definitely encourage that. But the other side of that, the whole time I'm thinking while he's talking is, how do women really feel about this? Because again, I've heard the guy perspective for so long. Oh, it doesn't hurt. It's not damaging. She doesn't care. It doesn't objectify her. My wife's fine with it. She's totally okay with it. She's cool. She's fine. Your wife just has insecurities. All of these lies. And it kind of kept resonating in my heart to say that I firmly believe this. Any man who says he's never struggled with lust is lying about other things. How would you respond to that statement?
Well, yeah. And even women, I mean, we are built that way. I mean, that's just how it is. To say that nobody's struggled with it, I mean, that's just crazy. Now, a struggle in the mind is one thing, but actually acting out is a whole nother story. And I would say that thoughts cross people's minds all the time. Now, also whether or not you pick it up and play with it or revisit it, that determines whether or not it's probably a problem for you. And then taking the next step, which is to go out and get it, And I can tell you that when things first started with my husband, it wasn't nearly as readily available. It just wasn't. I mean, there were still video stores back then.
Right.
But Blockbuster, I don't know. I mean, that's, you go to the back corner of the video store in the special little area, that kids couldn't go. And there were all sorts of, nasty things going on, in the back room with, you could see all the covers of these terrible videotapes. Oh man, they were pretty awful. But everything was because of the advancement in technology. I think things are so much easier. People don't have to go anywhere; they can just sit in their house and do it. So
it's true, and I think that's the problem with that's one of the problems with our society today. Is this, to me, is probably the greatest epidemic I think at least my generation is now facing. Is, back in my dad's day, probably, like you said, it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. I mean, it was probably prevalent, just wasn't as easily accessible as it is now. And I think, how do we stop it? Do you have any ideas? I mean, if you could be in charge of this whole process, right? I mean, what kind of things would you do to try to stop it in your mind?
Well, I don't want to rain on free speech or anything like that, but oh my gosh, at some point, I don't know. At some point, I feel like someone needs to take the reins and be responsible and say, this is incredibly damaging. It's just incredibly damaging to our culture. So I don't know how you go about doing that, other than if that type of thing is not going to be censored, then you need to have devices that could maybe filter. And like I said, I mean, I'm not getting paid to say anything about the companies that I have mentioned, other than they've really helped us and they really work. And it lists every single site and highlights the sites that could be. Yeah,
you don't represent Triple X Church or Covenant Eyes. You don't have like a partnership with them, and they're not sponsoring these episodes.
But I would say that as soon as my kid gets a phone, which is not going to be for a long time, probably they're not even going to have access to, any of that type of thing as far as Wi-Fi or the media accounts on their phones.
The social media accounts and things like that.
But once they do, we're going to have the protection. And I think that people need to be educated on what there is out there to help with that, to help with filters. Because, I mean, I can't imagine it ever being censored. So it needs to be up to us to spread the word that there's something you can do. You don't just have to be okay with it. You don't just have to hope that you don't ever see it. You don't ever have to, no, there are proactive things you can do.
You mentioned your faith quite a bit. And And you even kind of alluded to the fact that if somebody didn't have, your faith or your beliefs or things like that, you can imagine what they would have been through or how they would have walked through it. What advice, again, would you just give to somebody who's possibly struggling with this? Like, how fast should they really get after it and be proactive with it?
Boy, I would say that if there is anything going on of, any kind of searching for pornography or watching on TV, that's more than what there should be. There just is. Because, I believe that God created us to be sexual beings with our partners, with our spouse. And I think that anything else invited into that can only be damaging. So I think right off the bat, the only way to really, because my husband tried to do it on his own for years. You just have to get somebody else involved, somebody that you trust, somebody that can hold you accountable, that's not afraid to say the bad things, that's not afraid to say, hey, you need to step up here because you might be going down the wrong path. So I would say surround yourself with people who can help pull you out of it. And you just need to be honest and truly swallow your pride and your shame and put that aside, because if it's not dealt with, all it does is get worse.
And I think those are some great points to consider, right? Whether you have faith or even if you don't have faith, is the idea of, is this relationship important to you? And if it is, are you doing things to help protect that relationship, or are you going to just let it wither away into nothingness? Yeah, absolutely. Some great ideas there. So the last thing I want to just kind of ask you, if this behavior had continued, what speculate, of course, what do you think would have happened to your marriage and you had never found it?
Unfortunately, one thing leads to another. So I don't want to say what the future could have held, but I can only imagine that, marijuana being a gateway drug, at least that's what they say, and then it can lead to other things like cocaine or heroin. Pornography, I would say that's the gateway drug or gateway to being unfaithful to your spouse, because it's so easy in your mind. It's so easy to do. It's just there. And I would think that the more you do it, particularly the amount of time that he spent, doing it in the beginning, hours and hours a day. Where else can that go? That can't be good. This certainly can't be good on the sexual health of a marriage. And not to mention just everything else that's happening in your brain. All the rewiring that's taking place. Because, what things that did it at the beginning don't do it anymore. So you have to go looking for something that is more extreme, more out there. And then I'm guessing pornography, it won't be enough at some point to get that particular high that people are looking for and needing. So they go to the next level, which is maybe someone else, someone personal, instead of just, a woman on TV or in a magazine.
Why do you think people want to live in this shadow?
You mean why they don't want to, they want to do pornography secretly?
Yeah, why? Well, not only, it's easy why they probably want to do it secretly is because nobody's around, it's just easy, whatever. But why do you think it's so easy to live in this shadow of pornography and doing it and having that behavior, do you think?
Well, I would say it's easy. Well, it's easy because it's accessible, but there's an incredible amount of, whether people admit it or not, I think there's an incredible amount of shame that makes you want to just retreat in. And I don't know. I would say that probably those things.
And you mentioned the amount of time that he spent doing it. You said hours on end,
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever thought about what he could have done in those hours if he had directed his attention from those hours to you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, most of it was while I was gone at work.
Do you let yourself go there? Maybe back then you did. Maybe
I did.
Okay.
I did then.
So what came to mind during that time when you're processing through like all this time you're spending? You could have been doing this, or you could have been doing that, or you could have been.
Well, we had just finished building a house at that time, and there were so many things that were unfinished and things around the house, particularly that just weren't getting done, and weight that was being gained because sitting for hours and hours a day doing. You're
talking physical weight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So you got a little chubbier. All right.
That's just, there are so many, there's so many facets to it. I mean, really, so many facets to it. But it takes away productivity. It just does.
Okay. Christine, any final thought that you would say to any ladies that are listening, specifically ladies that are listening, or maybe even men? I'll let you maybe answer for both. What would you say to any lady that's listening right now?
Well, any lady that's listening, I would say that there is hope and there is healing. And for those who may, be fooling themselves into thinking that pornography is not a bad thing and, because you want to please your person that you're with, I would challenge you to really, really look at that and make sure that that's actually the case, because I'm guessing if you really examine it, you realize you're really not okay with it. But also then, if it is bothering you, that there is help. There are things that you can do. There are pastors that will help with that. There are counselors that can help. Maybe, they'll have a better counseling experience than we had. And there are people, have someone that is close to you that you can be accountable with and that can help walk you through it. Because honestly, to go through this life and try to do things on your own is just insane. You need someone close next to you because, it's hard to fall when you have someone who can come and pick you up. And for guys, I would say that you are kidding yourselves if you think that the woman that you are with does not care. Don't trust her words. I would say that it's much more damaging than what it seems. And once again, to question, why do you think you need that? If you think you need that, then maybe there's another problem that needs to be revisited, because the person that you're with should be enough.
I like it. All right, so we're going to play a game. Here's my magical cup of awesome. Sorry, it's not orange, but it's...
No, it is blue. Mm-hmm.
It's pretty...
It's okay, expected.
It's pretty color anyway. So you get to roll the die inside, and then from the die you get to answer this last question, which involves our game called Senseless. And you just rolled it right off the table. Here, you get to roll again.
All right.
That's what happens. Shake it up, shake it up. There we go. 3. You got a number 3. Everybody's been rolling 3s lately. I don't know why, but greatest thing you've ever smelled. Oh
my gosh, greatest thing I've ever smelled. Oh, this is totally easy.
Okay.
Fire. Like smoke from fire, specifically like a wildfire or a campfire or something along those lines, because that's when
you can't see my look, but I have a very puzzled look on my face. You got to explain that.
Well, when my husband was younger, he would come home and this was before we were married. We were just dating, but he was a wildland firefighter. And so he would come home smelling like the forest fire. And he'd have, smoke in his ears and up his nose. And every ounce of him would just reek of this smoke. And that to this day, 28 years later, that's the smell that I like, because it reminds me of when we first kind of got together. And yeah, I like the smell.
We don't need Brute. We don't need Old Spice.
Campfire.
We don't need Aspen cologne. That's what I wore. We need forest fire, apparently. Yeah. Never mind. That could go down a road. So, Christina, I just want to say, first off, was this easy to do?
It is now, because there's been time that has removed, me from the situation, and we have walked through it together, and our faith is really strong. Our relationship is so much stronger. And God uses everything. God uses everything to refine us. And I believe he used that part of our life to refine us to, what we are right now. So I'm grateful for it. I wouldn't change it. which is weird because, the first, I would say probably 2 to 3 years after it happened, I would have changed it. I would have wished that there was some way out, some way to just go back in time and erase it all. But now being far enough removed, I can see the benefit and the ministering tool that we can have for other people to help them walk through it. And we're grateful for that.
And then the last thing that comes to mind, why did you want to sit down with me?
Because you asked and you're my friend.
That's good. I appreciate that. That's honesty. No, I mean, I didn't know if once I told you what we were going to be talking about, if that motivated you more or if it's just because I am using and abusing our friendship potentially. Because if that's the case, then thank you. But
no, I think honestly, the biggest thing was hope, that there is hope on the other side. Something that the years following, I just didn't have. And I now have that. And I want people to know that there's something you can come out of much, much stronger. But it has to be dealt with. And it has to be dealt with openly and honestly. And, no regrets.
I want to close with just this thought. So I don't know about you, but me, there are probably about 3 things around the house that I absolutely despise doing. Okay. One of them is yard work. I hate it. I hate getting my hands dirty. I hate everything about it. I hate the grass. I hate the itchiness. I hate everything about yard work. Like, I know this sounds weird as a dude, so I'm probably going to lose my dude card or my guy card from my fellow guys that are hopefully listening out here. But I would rather wash dishes than do yard work.
You were weed eating yesterday. So.
I know, and I hated it. And I'll tell you why. Because it creates work. I'm sweating. I'm uncomfortable.
But you run. What are you talking about?
Well, but running's not work for me.
But you sweat when you run.
Well, true. But I don't know why. I just have, ever since I was a kid, I've always hated yard work. I've always hated everything about it. I just don't like it. I think because to me, it's never been enjoyable. It's never been a passion of mine to really just get out there and get my hands dirty and to, just get in the dirt and, whatever. Like it sucks, right? But I think this topic for me is much like yard work. There are some things that are going to be required of you, right? There's going to be some sacrifice. There's going to be setting yourself aside for the greater good. Yeah, now I can look at my yard and go, well, you know what? Look at it. Now it's nice. It's been maintained. It's, it's kind of cleaned up again. It's, it's nice. And I think that's what, to me, this issue is all about. Is this idea that we have to get behind the fact that it is going to take some work. It's going to take some uncomfortableness. You're not probably going to want to go to that significant other that you have in your life and say, babe, by the way, I've been dealing with this. Now what? And so I think that's the key I want people to hopefully key on is there are things in life we just don't like to do, but need to be done. Because if they're not dealt with, much like dishes or your yard work or whatever, it's going to get so overgrown or so stinky or, it's just going to create continued issue.
Right. And it's going to magnify
and both
just get worse.
Both chores, by the way, have to be done every day. Well, yes. Maybe not yard work, but the dishes do.
You need to keep up on it, yeah.
But you have to keep up on it, right? You have to stay vigilant. Maybe that's a better word to look at it. You have to be vigilant on that because if you don't, it can overgrow your life.
Right.
And overthrow your life.
And even now, probably every 6 months or so, I'll ask my husband and say, hey, just asking how you're doing with this. And I totally trust his answer, his response. And that's just something to just kind of do a quick check-in. It's something that we can totally do now. And I feel fine with it and it doesn't eat me alive. It's definitely not like checking websites every day, which is something I would never, ever, ever recommend that a wife or significant other do. Do not take on that accountability partner. He needs a dude just because you don't need to be struggling with that daily and reliving it every day.
No, and I think that is solid advice. So I am going to link in the show notes some of the things we talked about, Covenant Eyes, Triple X Church. Again, they're not sponsoring this in any way.
No.
It'd be cool if they did, but no, they are not.
No, it's just what we did. Just what we did.
Yeah, and those are some great resources. And I'm actually even going to link our church's website. And so if you are in the area and you are kind of struggling with this as a couple, even if you don't have faith or do have faith, I do want to make that available to you as well, because I know there are enough people in our church currently that would assist you greatly in this issue. So, Christine, again, just want to say thanks for coming on. Thanks for being more my wife's friend than my friend. So go Team Elizabeth, just so she can get her, love you, honey, so she can get her monetary mentions as she's lobbying to get paid for mentions. By the way, did I tell you that? She wants to get paid for mentions.
Oh, really? In Dutch Brother cards?
I don't know what, but she wants to be paid for mentions, so I'm going to just leave that there and move on. But I just want to remind everybody, when we walk in other people's shoes, we really do get a different perspective on life. So just something to keep in mind as we go forward. Thank you for listening. This is, of course, Other People's Shoes, and stay tuned for future episodes. Thank you again.